In this module, you will learn how VMware vRealize automation discovers, organizes, and allocates the resources available to service users. Here is what you should be able to do at the end of this module. During installation, VMware Identity Manager creates one system administrator account and one default tenant. The system administrator first configures the default tenant, then creates additional tenants if desired, and assigns a tenant administrator to each tenant. All user authentication is handled by Active Directory links. Each tenant has one or more Active Directory links that provide authentication on a user or group level. Each tenant has its own dedicated configuration. Click a configuration option to learn more about it. A tenant administrator can further subset users within their tenant by creating business groups and assigning users to the groups. Each business group has at least one business group manager who monitors the resource use for the group and often is an approver for catalog requests. Here is a summary of the user roles within a tenant. Tenant roles typically have responsibilities that are limited to a specific tenant and cannot affect other tenants in the system. Click a role to learn more about it. In addition to designating tenant administrators, after installation, the system administrator also designates an Infrastructure as a Service administrator. The Infrastructure as a Service administrator discovers and organizes the infrastructure fabric, that is, the compute, networking, and storage resources available to allocate for tenant use. The Infrastructure as a Service administrator creates an endpoint to communicate with each source in the infrastructure. Infrastructure sources can include a group of virtualization compute resources or a cloud service account. An Infrastructure as a Service administrator configures an infrastructure source by specifying the endpoint details and credentials that vRealize automation can use to communicate with the source. Adding compute resources to a fabric group places the resources under vRealize automation control. When the connection to an infrastructure source is established, vRealize automation collects information about the compute resources available through that source. The Infrastructure as a Service administrator can then organize those resources into fabric groups and assign a Fabric administrator to manage each group. Here are some examples of infrastructure sources and their corresponding endpoints. For a complete list of supported infrastructure source endpoints, click the Resources tab. A Fabric administrator can create reservations to allocate resources in the Fabric group to specific business groups. Reservations allow business groups to share resources from the same host or host cluster, but not consume more resources than those which they are allocated. Business groups can share resources from the same Fabric group or from different Fabric groups for greater isolation of resources between groups. vRealize automation includes 3 roles for system-wide administration. System-wide roles are typically assigned to an IT system administrator. In some organizations, the Infrastructure as a Service administrator role might be the responsibility of a cloud administrator. Click a role to learn more about it.